Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Indians. I am your host, Jeff Ellis. You might notice a change in decor if you are an everyday listener due to my knee problems. I can't quite take the whole rig upstairs. So you are getting the stereotypical basement show for the Locked On for a sports podcaster doing it. We have a special guest. Of course, I will talk about him here in a second to talk about what else could we talk about? The big trade. Frankie Lindor, Carlos Carrasco, no more. I'm got this at a social media night a few years ago. Everybody is gone. You can scan through and you can see the names. This is my version of just kind of doing the thanks for the memories. You know, Corey Kluber, Michael Brantley, Jan Gomes, Jason Kipnis, and then as I go this way, Carlos Carrasco, our last friend. Like I said, I'll introduce our guest here in a second, but I think Carrasco is the one that hurts me the most because I can't help but feel like in this trade, Carrasco is almost like a negative value, and I'll get into that a bit, where the Indians were more interested in cutting salary and trading him before his 10-5 rights kicked in than they were trading him because of demand. The Indians added 4 players. I don't think we can really say they're better today than they were before. I thought there were situations where we could say that, where if they split Lindor and got multiple pieces that could help them right away, that made sense. It's an interesting trade, and if we're going to talk prospects, we're going to talk young players. There was one person in network to go bring in, and that was Aram Leighton. I paused there because I butchered names. Hopefully I got it right. Who is the host of Locked On Prospects and Locked On Marlins. When the video is live, people will be able to see your screen name. But for those listening on the audio podcast, tell them where they can find you online.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can find me at Aram Leighton 8 on Twitter and at LO_MLB Prospects, where I'll be talking about this trade as well. So this is a nice little primer for what's going to be a very, very interesting episode too on my end. So I'm excited to talk about it here because, yeah, it hurts. And as you know, as you mentioned, I hosted Locked On Marlins. I still do. And I've been a Marlins fan since I was a kid. So basically any Marlins item that I had from the mid 2000s on is obsolete. So I know that feeling.
Yeah, I was trying to think back. It's like, who's left from, and on a very base level, there's a lot of anger today, and I got a lot of that nicely directed at me. I always say Indians fans are quite nice and know that I'm not responsible, but they want me to explain things. And in some respects, the worst thing that happened to the Indians was the 2016 World Series, because that team lost all of its pitchers almost due to injury and got as far as any team has in recent memory. Or wait, did I say the wrong year? Might have there. But that World Series year, they had all their injuries and they made it to the World Series. Since then, the Indians operate under as long as you make the postseason, who knows what could happen. And that postseason team, I was like, who's left? Is there anyone in place? And I think we are at a point where Jose Ramirez might be the last man standing. It's kind of a sad day. And we're not going to talk about possible Jose Ramirez trades. A lot of questions about that. I do think we can start a timer on him. Let's put it that way. I think he's got about 18 months max left in system. But we have so many other players to talk about, so many other prospects. One other fact before I throw it to Aram here, as I tweeted out earlier today, if you go and look at the Indians' top 10 first-round picks by WAR all time, it goes Manny Ramirez, CC Sabathia, Greg Swindell, Frankie Lindor. Chuck Nagy comes 5, and this is where it gets painful because 6 and 7, Jeremy Guthrie and Kelly Gruber were guys that cut. Ray Fosse got hurt. Drew Pomeranz is somehow in the top 10.
Oh my gosh.
Rick Manning is more famous for stealing Dennis Eckersley's wife than anything he did on the baseball field. And then Lonnie Chisenhall is somehow 11th all time. That is where we are as a first round. And that first round is still light years ahead of any other round. So it's, they traded one of the bedrock guys of the last 30 years. They got 4 young players. What can you tell us? Where do you want to start? Dealer's choice here. Who do you want to go with? Discuss. Who are you liking? Not liking? Leave it up to you.
Let's start with some of the good, I guess, right? Because it's a solid return given the circumstances. I really think it is when you factor in the fact that they were not going to pay him, right? Everybody knew that. Everybody knew Lindor was gone, and whoever was trading for Lindor is going to have to pay him a lot, right? So when you consider that and you look at some of the other trades in the past, Mookie Betts, somewhat of a light return because of the same fact. You also look at like the Giancarlo Stanton trade. He was already inked to a crazy contract, but the return was not great for that exact reason as well. So especially in this COVID world where teams are apparently very financially strapped, the return's going to be a little bit light. But what I will say is they did get a lot of upside. And I think they hedged some of that upside with guys that are big league ready right now. And it starts, I could start with Rosario, but I want to start with a more positive guy. So I'm going to start with Jimenez, because Andres Jimenez, to me, is a really solid piece to be getting back here. And I think he plugs right in at shortstop. He's an incredible defender. He's a plus runner. He's a well-rounded player, and I think there's more room there to improve at the plate. Is he ever going to hit for power? No, of course not. But I think he's a really well-rounded player. Of course, you're sacrificing a lot of production at shortstop from Lindor to Jimenez, but you are getting a really, like a gold glove caliber defender. You're getting a plus runner. You're getting a really well-rounded player, and he's big league ready, still has upside to get better. I like his swing from the left side. I think it's a really smooth swing. He's good at just being able to work counts, get on base. I think that's a good starting point for the Indians here to get a guy that they can plug straight in at shortstop right now. So you're not feeling the void as much. And, Rosario goes in at second base in the meantime. We know that the Indians have a ton of contingency plans at second base or in the middle infield in general, which we'll get into a little bit later. I know you want to talk about that. But I'm curious what the kind of response has been. I don't think there was ever going to be really a trade where Indians fans were going to be thrilled about the return, especially given the circumstances. But Jimenez has got to be at least a decent silver lining here, where you're getting a really, really good defender at a big spot who had a surprisingly good year for a really young player at the big league level that just did not seem fazed by the big stage.
Yeah, anyone who listens to the show knows I've been since, before last season, before the start of 2020, I was discussing Lindor trades just because it was inevitable. It's one of those things. When he hit arbitration, he was never going to sign. He played it out to get to free agency, and there's nothing wrong with that. And he paid his dues, and he got to the majors young, and he was going to hit free agency at an age where he was going to be able to cash in. Good for him. And I've been talking about the Mets since then. Now, last summer, I started kind of this love affair with Dom Smith, who had been kind of a disappointment and had a good, started to turn it around. And then he had the huge year this year, and he was still kind of the guy I knew they weren't going to get, but I really wanted. I thought J.D. Davis, looking at his savant numbers, is interesting, but he's not in Indians. I mean, he's Franmil Reyes. It is interesting. I talk about who are Indians guys. And I know going back to the Clevenger trade and talking about what stuff with the Padres, the things they value. And this was kind of a trade that was different in some regards. I mean, up the middle talent, very similar, but they went for a little more risk. But I think Davis basically having no defensive position was what made him not as interesting as you put it. I mean, Jimenez is going to be their starting shortstop. I know some people have asked, he'll pick, at least he's played some games at second in the majors, and Rosario has only played shortstop. Jimenez is so much better defensively. You're not going to, because Jimenez has played 20 games at second, have him play second. You're going to slot him in there. Kind of the low end comp for me with Jimenez is Jose Iglesias, who, again, if you listen to the podcast, I was like, the Indians should consider trading for him if they trade Lindor as a nice filler, strong defensive type. Doesn't walk a lot, doesn't strike out a lot. I did have to laugh when you're talking about power, just from our earlier conversation in the chat, where I think the only person who thinks he's going to have power, and I respect Dylan, right? Over on the Braves, and he talked about him developing 20 home run power. So I just want to give him a shout out and say I hope he's right, and say I never thought Lindor would develop the power he has to this day. So stranger things have happened.
Yeah,
I
you saw what I promised. You saw what I promised.
Yeah,
right?
The tattoo. I saw you're gonna get a Braves tattoo across your chest.
I said I'll get a Braves tat on my chest if he hits 20 home runs.
He had multiple seasons of 20 home runs.
Yes, which he has not hit 20. I think he's hit 22 home runs in over 300 career minor league games. I will say, he might have that thought because of Ozzie Albies and his 5'8" stature. But when I look at the raw bat speed there, Jimenez has a nice swing. I think he's got some bat speed, but I just don't think he has that kind of whippy swing and that leverage. He doesn't generate that kind of leverage where you're going to be looking
all
at
whip.
That guy's all whip.
I don't know if there's anyone who has more whip. And again, this is not Dylan is fantastic, and he could very well end up being right. He might see.
He'll be right, and I'll be wrong, and I'll have a tattoo on my chest in a year.
But
that's just the way it's
I mean, I agree. I think it's it's a low ceiling upside where he's a strong defender, and you're hoping for about league average with the bat. But I mean, you're going for that defense and speed. I mean, that's the central piece here. And You look at this team for next year in particular is going to be built around pitching and defense. And they just got a guy who Lindor is a great defender. He has had a little bit of regression there over the years. They're not going to miss a beat. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't lose anything defensively. They're losing a lot offensively, but I don't think they're going to miss. There's a chance he might be better than Lindor. I know there's going to be people out there who are going to cringe at that, but they might have gotten a little bit better defensively. But yeah, I think, he's the centerpiece. He's the star. When I talked with Ryan of Locked On Mets back in November, his whole thing was he would trade Jimenez or Dom Smith, but not both. You had to pick one or the other. And while I think in the end, Dom was probably off the table, I think when you're looking at people ask about Nimmo, I believe Nimmo only has 2 years left. So he's like, his contract is the same length as Lindor's, which would have caused issues. Davis's defense. Davis also is getting arbitration expensive. Rosario is as well, but not as much. So I think all of that comes together where Jimenez is the most control. He plays in up the middle position, and he's safe. Like it's hard to find a way where he fails to at least be okay.
Well, let me ask you this though, because we talked about this off the air a little bit, and when I think about prospects and then I think about how it's going to be integrated into the big league team, and that's why I love talking to the hosts of the big league teams, because they can kind of help balance me out there. Is I know all the prospects, I know the big league teams, but not as much about the big league front office's plan with some of the players and some of those things. So my question here is, like we were talking about it off the air before, Ahmed Rosario, I think is incredibly redundant with Jimenez, right? Like Jimenez is what I think the Mets were hoping Rosario would be. And I think Jimenez has already leapfrogged Rosario in the regard of offensive profile right now. I like his approach way better. I know neither walk very much, but I like his approach a lot more. He's a better defender. I think he's just a more well-rounded player. Rosario is actually just as fast at when we talk about sheer sprint speed, but they are stark differences between the two when we look at base stealing, right? Rosario gave up on stealing bases because he was so bad last year, to the point where this past year he only tried once and he was thrown out, and that was it. And Jimenez was actually a pretty solid base stealer. I think he was 8 of 9 this past year, and he's a better defender at this point too. I'm wondering why the Indians didn't have some interest in JD Davis, because we're talking about Nolan Jones off the air, right? And Nolan Jones looks like he can't hit left-handed pitching. Maybe he will figure it out. I do have some hope because of his incredible ability to walk. But if he is going to be more of a platoon guy and he's going to be more focused on facing right-handed pitching, why wouldn't you want a JD Davis? That would be a really good platoon at third base, where you have JD Davis, who demolishes left-handed pitching, Nolan Jones, who demolishes right-handed pitching, and Davis is not a great defender no matter where you put him, but you could stick him in the outfield when you want to have both of those guys in the lineup for whatever reason. And I just thought that would be a perfect fit. It seemed to make so much sense. But when you mentioned the arbitration, I wonder if it was just more financially driven. And also it makes me think too, when we look at the system for the Indians, is where does Rosario really fit in? Because I could probably name 3 middle infielders, maybe 4, that are more projectable than Rosario at this point. And is he just going to be a piece that ends up getting flipped at the deadline or something? I could see that being a distinct possibility. I do like some of the other high upside young pieces that we can talk about too. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that too, because I think JD Davis and Nolan Jones would have been a pretty dynamite platoon at third base.
Yeah, I really like Davis. It's the going and looking at Baseball Savant, and he has his deficiencies, but he just hits. And this is an offense that it looks like it is going to be anemic, and he would have looked fine in any form. I think back to going back long enough to when I was at Scout, not even 24/7, but when Scout still existed, and I was working with Taylor Ward over there. Like Ahmad Rosario is one of our top 10 prospects in the game at that point in time. And I was like, plus hit tool, he's going to be a plus defender. And the defense has kind of regressed a bit. And the hit, and he's another one of those guys where I feel like I just sit back and I'm like, we don't know how to evaluate hit tool properly. Like he doesn't walk enough. He doesn't work enough counts. And I think for the Indians, it just comes down to 2020. Some guys had weird years, like just horrible, horrible years. We talked about, the Pirates recently with Josh Bell and like all of their young hitters. And 2020 was ugly for Rosario. Not that particularly 2018 or 2017 were all that better, But when you look at his 2019 data, what could be interesting, what could have made the Indians go, and think that, because here's the thing with the Indians love a steal. They love a steal. You go back to when they traded Cliff Lee, Carlos Carrasco had been like the Phillies' top prospect for like 4 straight years and was on a bit of a decline. Jason Knapp was the centerpiece in that deal. And Jason Donald and Lou Marson and all those guys were considered kind of down value. They love getting those guys whose value are down and just kind of buying cheaply. You could even argue with the Clevenger deal that someone like Naylor and Quantrell are value down pieces. And that's Rosario. They're buying someone cheap, and you're hoping that you go back to those 2019 Baseball Savant data numbers where his expected batting average was 91st percentile in all baseball, expected K 67, exit velocity 54, hard hit 51. So while those aren't huge numbers, it shows some power, like close to league average power, not necessarily production, but there's the chance that he's going to run into some things. Now, his barrel percentage is very low. His walk percentage is horrendous. It's a very limited profile, but I think they weren't going to sign Cesar Hernandez, and this might be more of, they don't have to add Owen Miller to their 40-man yet, and they don't seem to be rushing to do that. And Yu Chen Chang would have been the other guy who maybe would have been out there competing for reps. This seems like they're going to, I feel like Rosario is an important piece. I feel like you can pretty much slot him in and put him at second base, and they're going to see if he can rebound. And if he shows some of that 2019 value up, great, they have him. If he plays more like 2020, I think at the end of the year, they designate him for assignment and move on. I think he's a roll the dice. Even going back to that Padres deal, there's some round for comparison with Austin Hedges, who I think is going to make the same amount, or was projected to make as much in arbitration as Rosario, where it's the defensive profile, interesting tools, and you're hoping there's some rebound. I agree that, like, every deal I talked about, just because the Indians needed someone who was ready to step in sooner rather than later, he was a guy I didn't mind as a third or fourth piece because of that potential for a steal or a rebound there. But I feel like he is the second piece in this deal. I could be wrong, but I feel like the way is projected and laid out that he is the number 2 piece. And for me, it's hard to defend that positioning, just because, yes, he's a major league player. I don't know if he is more than a utility guy. I heard some talk of trying him in the outfield, and the Mets were considering that because of the speed. The Indians outfield, they seem okay with, which I don't understand. We talked about that off air as well. They seem to be.
If he can play center, maybe.
But yeah, there's some talk that maybe he would get some chances at center as well and be a super utility type. So that is something else to definitely keep in mind. Before we get into the secondary pieces on this deal, just want to take a quick break and talk about the sponsors that help keep this show going and on the air. Are you ready for football? We have the national championship on Monday. The playoffs are this weekend. What a time to be a Cleveland fan. The Indians are trading one of the greatest players in franchise history, and the Browns have like 40% of the roster out with COVID. That's nothing with our sponsor, but this might be the perfect time to go out and bet on that Browns game. Go check the lines. Go to betonline.com. Browns don't have a head coach in half their roster. Go check it out. You might be able to win yourself some money. And when you go to betonline.ag, the number one place that has you covered, the number one place we trust, sign up for your free account and use the promo code LOCKEDON for a 50% welcome bonus. I don't know a ton about gambling, but I found the site relatively easy to go through. I went through and was looking at all the various sports. There's so many options. If you're someone who does know, this is a great site to go. Like I said, I'm a neophyte. I could figure it out. If you know it, you'll be able to go and navigate. When you're using that promo code LOCKEDON, you're getting a 50% welcome bonus. That's huge. That's 50% bonus free. You're never going to get a better offer on anything we do from a sponsor than 50%. So check out betonline.ag. Use that locked on promo code. Visit our good friends and exclusive partner at betonline_AG to take advantage of the best bonuses in the business. Sign up for a free account and use the promo code locked on for that sign up bonus. Hashtag betonline. I've been watching Cobra Kai, so I should say hash brown betonline.
I actually everyone's been watching that. I got to get on that. That's top of my list. But also, I will say I'm taking the Browns. I'm taking the Browns this week. I think everybody's going to bet Steelers. I think they're frauds. I think the Browns still find a way. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, we'll definitely have to have you back on either way to talk you up if you got it right, or you're like, oh, what did we miss? Our other fantastic sponsor. Let's do the 2-for-1 on things that are like very sporty things that I don't know a lot about, and that's cars. Rock Auto. I don't know cars. I can't do anything with cars. I can fill up the air in my tires. That's about it. But in spite of my lack of knowledge, I can navigate their site with ease. You go to Rock Auto, and what I like to use their site for is when I do have a problem. Recently had a flat tire. I went on and I comparison shopped. You have the ability with rockauto.com to comparison shop. Make sure you're getting the right deal, the right price. Make sure that we all know that when you go to the mechanic, they don't have your best interest in heart. Rock Auto is a family-owned business. They keep the overhead low, pass those savings on to you. When you go to rockauto.com and you find that great deal, because you will when you go there, you're going to use the promo code Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box. That lets them know that their advertising money was well spent. And again, keep them. This is a great advocate for you when it comes time to get a piece or part for your car. The mechanic isn't looking out for you. Rock Auto is. Go to rockauto.com. Tell them Locked On. Tell them Locked On MLB. Tell them Locked On Indians. Tell them Locked On. Tell them Locked On Marlins if you like our guest today. Tell them Locked On anything. But just tell them Locked On sent you. And lastly, 2020 is mercifully over. I know I am very thankful for that myself. It's time for a fresh start and a few more wins. If you're betting this year and want more wins, listen to Locked On Bets with your boy Q and Lee Sterling of Paramount Sports. They are picking college basketball, football, and NBA locks all winter long. Subscribe to Locked On Bets wherever you get your podcasts. So I'll say the word "so" because that's what I always say, so people know we're back. Not that it's become intentional now because I did it accidentally for so long, and it's now my running joke that you can wait for the "so." We talked about the big pieces in this deal, the guys who are going to help. I saw some people in the Cleveland media talking about these secondary players. I'm going to throw some things that came out where they're talking about, these are interesting players. Isaiah Green, a lot of people, Michael Brantley is the name that is coming up. That does not feel very fair to me. And I think if he was Michael Brantley, not to diss his skills, but if Isaiah Green was a Michael Brantley comp, he would have been a higher first-round pick. There's good skills. He's a lotto ticket. I think he's the second most interesting outfielder in system. We'll talk about outfielders in a second. And the other player, Josh Wolf, I'd like to talk about him in terms of Lenny Torres, as they were both like first-round picks and they're right-handers. Wolf's like 6'1" or 6'2", 6'3". Torres was like 6'1", 6'2", two-pitch guys, high ceilings, and they can just whip it. Like they might have the two quickest arms in the system between the two of them. High reliever risk, though. I think Wolf has. We talked about this off air as well. I think Wolf has a better chance to start. I'm not going to dive into him too much because I don't want to steal your thunder here. But my quote was, "These guys are like 2 years away from being 2 years away." The guys who were going to help, we already discussed. These are the guys that we're hoping down the line. And the other thing, before I just throw it to you, we were discussing and debating, would either of these guys make the Indians' top 10 prospects? And I'll kind of kick it to you. Like, do you think either? Again, the Indians have a deep pool, and I'm not saying these guys are trash. I don't want anyone to think that. They're very interesting players, and I'll give you that plenty of time to tell them why they should be excited. These are fun prospects to add. But do either of them make the top 10, and what's your overall feel?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think for the Indians here, you're looking at their system. It's an interesting system. But in a trade like this, where you're not going to get the true value for Francisco Lindor, at least you can get some upside to where you might look back at the trade and say that wasn't so bad. I think when you look at Josh Wolf, when you look at Isaiah Green, lotto ticket is probably fair on Isaiah Green. But I will say I really liked him out of the draft. I think he's really polished for a high school hitter. He's got great tools, and he's a well-rounded player. When you see that comp, comps in general are fun. People love them. I love doing them sometimes. And I say, like, he can be a guy like this. Like, if everything works out, he will be similar to this guy. It doesn't mean he's going to be that guy, but if everything works out, he will be this guy. I think the comp is fair if everything works out, right? But there's a lot of moving pieces for everything to work out. What I will say about Isaiah Green, though, is for a guy his age and for a guy that is pretty lanky, long arms, that left-handed swing, typically you see guys with long legs, like long limbs, skinny, tend to have not as much body control with their swing. And what I was impressed with Green is that he does have that body control. He does actually use his lower half better than most high school types of profiles of that kind of hitter. I like Green to be a guy that should be able to hit the ball well enough to work his way into full season ball this coming year. And I think he's a pretty good and interesting prospect. I would say Wolf is the more valuable guy. And to answer your question more directly, Wolf has a shot to crack that top 10. Of course, there's some moving parts here. Guys graduating, with McKenzie, I guess he would be graduated by the start of the season. That always confuses me with who's graduated or not.
Technically he qualifies, but they, I have to dig into it. But yeah, they did.
I think he's technically still a prospect. He's off the list. And I love Tristan McKenzie, by the way. But I would say there's a chance. I would put him right at the 9 to 12 range. But the thing is the second he puts together a few good outings in wherever he'll be, because he did look really good in his 2 outings in rookie ball, I think he's going to start to play his way up into the top 10. And I think he has the stuff. We're talking about his profile. He's a first round pick as far as I'm concerned. People will point out, they just traded for a second round pick and a third round pick. Not really. I mean, he got first round money for a reason. He was a first round caliber player, and he has first round caliber stuff. 6'3", 170. You talk about the really quick arm. And when we compare him to some of the other guys, I think what's different about Wolf is that he made some adjustments recently. He lowered his arm slot. His mechanics seem much more repeatable. He seems like he's got a better feel for his stuff. And I think he's got a shot to really find that third pitch, maybe better than some other very raw pitchers that you're going to find. And I think if he can find that changeup a little bit more and find a way to tunnel it, now that he's found that new arm slot, he's going to have to find a way to repeat that changeup in the same arm slot. But his fastball is electric, runs it up to the upper 90s. His command is not bad for a 6'3" high school arm. And you mentioned the guys with the really quick arm, sometimes they struggle to time everything up with their body. I don't see too much of an issue with that, and I really like his 2-pitch mix already. I could see Wolf as a guy that explodes. I could see him as a guy that struggles too, and that's that high ceiling, low floor type of profile with guys like this. But I like him. I think that is a good piece to be able to get here as a tertiary or fourth even piece in this deal. I would probably say he's the third piece, Isaiah Green being the fourth. But to still have upside on your third and fourth pieces in this deal, and legitimate upside where you can make the case for both of these guys to be top 100 prospects if they really get it going in the next year or two, that's not a bad piece to be able to get here. Yeah, you're betting on upside, you're taking risk, but that's probably what they were dealing with here. They were either going to get a low ceiling, high floor type like Owen Miller, or they could go for that super high ceiling guy that is very volatile. And I like that risk there because they got the higher floor guys in the front end of the deal with the 2 shortstops.
I always talk about when it comes to trades like this, you want to look out for guys who don't fit the mold. Because if a team likes a guy to go against their belief, then that says something to me. And when you look at Isaiah Green, first off, the Indians, there's a lot of risk. It's a high risk profile, but the Indians are also the most age obsessed team when it comes to the draft of any team in baseball. Isaiah Green turned 19 in August. Those guys have been day 3 picks or later. They've avoided guys with that age profile for the better part of a decade. So when they go out and actively acquire that player, I think it also speaks to something where it is they're willing to go against their models for that player. There's something there. So just something to keep in mind. And then I, of course, just have to mention Petey Halpin was also a California high school kid taken this past year. So Green got a little under 900,000, I want to say, and is the 69th overall pick. Petey Halpin, the Indians got in the 3rd round, 95th overall. They gave him 1.6 million or 1.5 million, which was also to get him to slide there. But that's those two instantly joined kind of the cream of that outfield crop. You explained why Wolf and Green are interesting, but we have to, I think, talk a little bit about George Valera when we're talking about that outfield group. Daniel Johnson fans are a little more familiar with, but let's talk about the guy who is at the very top of those rankings ahead of those 2 recent additions with Halpin and Green.
I mean, yeah, George Valera is, and I use the word freak endearingly quite often with some of these. I was just talking about the Giant system on the podcast and talking about Marco Luciano and just the whip and power he's able to generate for a guy. Yeah, he's 6'2", 6'3", but he's only 170 pounds. Valera's 5'11", like 185, right, 190. And yeah, that's a stockier, stronger build, but he's not a behemoth. He's not a monster by any stretch, but he is able to generate a lot of power because of the fact that he just has so much raw bat speed. He is so fun to watch hit. But I will say there is a lot of movement in his swing. There are a lot of things that he has to time up. And typically that doesn't really bode well as you get into the upper levels. And I'm a little bit worried about that with Valera, but at the same time, I hedge that with the fact that if there's anybody that could handle excessive movement in their swing because they're so athletic and so just fluid, I would say it's Valera. I think he's going to make some adjustments as he moves up and quiet some things down. And as he does that, he's going to unlock a lot more consistency. But that's where the hit tool thing becomes a little confusing, right? Because he has a 60 grade hit tool probably across the board when you look at all of the prospect rankings. And I can see that. I can see why he would be given a 60 grade hit tool, because he has incredible bat to ball skills. He has incredible raw bat speed, and he repeats his swing pretty well. But at the same time, his timing can get a little thrown off kilter, especially against older competition and limited exposure that we've seen. And how does that factor into the hit tool, right? If all works out and he starts timing things up well and he allows himself to really tap into what he has, then yeah, that's a 60 grade hit tool. But if he continues to have this movement and doesn't quiet things down and it starts to seep into his approach, then there's going to be some questions there. I will say when we look at tools, he's as talented as anybody you're going to find in all of the minor leagues, especially at his age, just turned 20 years old, right? I still qualify him as that teenager designation. And when you look at teenagers, he's right up there with anybody. And from the left side to have that kind of powerful swing, I could see a 2020 to 30-30 potential. I don't know if he's got that kind of speed, probably not. But when we look at his ability to just really get it done at the plate and his savviness on the bases, I don't think he's ever going to steal 30, but I like that 2020 profile with probably 30 home runs if he's able to tap into it and find that consistency. But that broken hamate bone, right, that's going to factor into some things. That takes a little bit of time to come back from. And he's so whippy and explosive that I think that hampered him quite a bit. And once you break that bone, it takes a while to come back. There's a lot of new handles and stuff. I'm curious if he uses it. There's new handles for guys that broke their hamate bone, interesting enough. And, maybe that'll be something that is a little bit more comfortable for him. But I think with all of that movement and that whippiness, that probably played a factor to the fact that he broke that hamate bone. But overall, I really like this guy. I think he's going to figure it out. And his tools are just off the charts.
Yeah, here's the funny thing. So we discussed beforehand, and we had a whole list of names, most of which we haven't even had a chance to get to. We're already at 33 minutes. So I guess we're just going to have you come back on another time to talk some. I know Owen Miller we didn't get to, and Nolan Jones and some of the other ones. So consider this a part one for inevitable part two at some point soon to talk about some names. Again, here, before I let you go, before I do the final summation, just let everyone who's listening after the talk now know where they can find you online, find your podcasts and the like.
Absolutely. At Aram Leighton 8 on Twitter. That's ARAMLEIGHTON on Twitter, and at LO_MLB Prospects. The podcast is Locked On MLB Prospects. And we'll be doing an Indians farm system breakdown sometime soon. So I'll be looking forward to that one, and definitely keep an eye out for that in the next couple weeks.
So just to do a final summation on this deal, it's a heartbreaker. I think as an Indians fan, we all knew Lindor was going. He was inevitable. It was not someone they were going to be able to keep. Losing Carrasco is the one I think right now hurts. And as an Indians fan, we do have to say that Chris Antonetti promised that they were going to reinvest some of that money in the team. We will have to wait and see. We were told that last year with Corey Kluber, and of his $18 million option, they reinvested $6 million with Cesar Hernandez. So a little bit of an incomplete right now on any way we judge this deal until we see it. But it is, as of right now, the Cleveland Indians have the lowest payroll in baseball for 2021. We will see if that stays or not. It is sad to see Carrasco go. A man who overcame cancer, who has been with the team as long as he has, was the heart and soul of this team. And at the end of the day, it is crazy to think that he was probably a negative asset for an Indians team that, yes, they lost a minority owner 3 years ago when Sherman became the owner of the Royals. But right now, it's hard to look at some of these deals. And again, Lindor, they had to do. I think the front office is doing a fantastic job for having their hands tied. But I think if you are a Cleveland fan, you can't help but see some shades of when Art Modell ran the Browns and couldn't afford to own the team. And we had some moves like that. If I am fine with the Indians being a low payroll team, I am fine with them being bottom 10. With the way and as well as this team has played, though, I think that there isn't anyone out there who can be happy of seeing them have the lowest payroll and seeing them currently go for that lowest payroll. While a trade of Lindor was inevitable, not seeing some investment in this team right now is very hard. And I really love the front office. I would love to see the front office stay and just have a little bit of more things to work with. I think they're doing everything they can. But that is my final take on this. It's the best thing about Paul Dolan is he gets out of the way. Absolutely the best thing. The worst thing about him is he lost his minority owner and since then has been cutting payroll at high rates. And then the whole COVID situation made it worse. And why did they not get a Mookie Betts return? Well, that's part of it. So I think the front office did as well as they could. I think it's going to be a fun team still to watch. There's still some stars in place. I understand for anyone who is frustrated out there, and I can feel that frustration myself. I have been Jeff Ellis. This has been the Locked On Indians podcast. Thank you for listening. Remember to download daily, rate and review. All of that helps. Go check out everything Aram does. It is all great. You're going to want to check out the Indian stuff in particular if you're listening to this podcast. And at least for the next year, go Tribe.